In a small classroom in Wilmington, North Carolina, a 15-year-old boy stood up to share his biggest dream. What happened next would change basketball history forever. The teacher's cruel words were meant to crush his spirit. Instead, they lit a fire that would burn for over 20 years, driving him to become the greatest player who ever lived. But the real story isn't about basketball championships or fame or money. It's about the day Michael Jordan returned home to face the woman whose racist comment had created a legend. What she told him in that final conversation will surprise you. This is the untold story of how hate became fuel, how pain became power, and how a teacher's worst moment helped create one of sport's greatest legacies. The journey begins on a cold October morning in the October wind whistled through the tall oak trees outside Emsley A. Laney High School in Wilmington, North Carolina. 15-year-old Michael Jordan walked down the hallway with his books tucked under his arm. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as he headed to his second period English class. Michael was tall for his age at 6 feet, but still growing into his body. His arms and legs seemed too long sometimes. He wore a simple blue button-down shirt and khaki pants that his mother had pressed the night before. The Jordan family didn't have much money, but Dolores Jordan made sure her children always looked neat and clean. The classroom smelled like chalk dust and old books. 25 wooden desks sat in neat rows facing the blackboard. Motivational posters hung on the walls with sayings like "Reach for the stars" and "Hard work pays off." The morning sun streamed through tall windows, making dust particles dance in the air. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield stood at the front of the room. She was 45 years old with graying brown hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her glasses hung from a chain around her neck, and she wore a stern expression that rarely changed. She had taught English at Laney High for 15 years and came from an old Southern family that had lived in Wilmington for generations. Michael took his usual seat in the third row. His best friend James Worthy sat 2 seats behind him. James was also on the basketball team and dreamed of playing in college someday. The boys often talked about their favorite NBA players during lunch break. Other students filled the room quickly. There was Sarah Chen, who wanted to be a doctor. Tommy Williams hopes to join the military after graduation. Lisa Brown talked about becoming a teacher like her aunt. Everyone seemed to have big dreams for their futures. Mrs. Whitfield called the class to order with a sharp clap of her hands. "Today, we're going to discuss your future goals," she announced. Her voice was crisp and demanding. "I want each of you to share what you plan to do after high school. This will help you think about why your education matters." She pointed to the first row. "Sarah, let's start with you." Sarah stood up nervously. "I want to go to college and study medicine. I hope to become a doctor and help sick people get better." Mrs. Whitfield nodded with approval. "Excellent. That's a realistic goal that requires hard work and dedication." She moved to the next student. Tommy talked about joining the Air Force. Mrs. Whitfield praised his patriotic choice. Lisa shared her teaching dreams and received another positive response. Then, Mrs. Whitfield's eyes landed on Michael. She had never liked him much, though he wasn't sure why. He always did his homework and got good grades in her class. He stayed quiet and respectful, just like his mother taught him. "Michael Jordan," she said, pointing directly at him. "Tell us about your future plans." Michael stood up slowly. His heart began beating faster. He had been thinking about this question for months. Every night he dreamed about playing basketball. He imagined hearing crowds cheer his name and winning championships. "I want to play professional basketball," Michael said clearly. His voice carried confidence and hope. "I'm going to work really hard and make it to the NBA someday." The room fell completely silent. Some students turned to look at Michael with interest. James Worthy smiled and gave him a thumbs up from behind. But Mrs. Whitfield's face changed. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. She looked at Michael like he had said something foolish and wrong. "Michael Jordan," she said slowly, making sure every student could hear her words. "You people need to stop dreaming about sports and start thinking about realistic jobs." Michael felt his stomach drop. The phrase "you people" hit him like a punch to the chest. He knew exactly what she meant. He had heard those words before from other adults who looked at him and saw only his skin color. But Mrs. Whitfield wasn't finished. "Basketball won't put food on your table," she continued, her voice getting louder. Maybe you should consider being a janitor like your kind usually do. That's honest work that doesn't require impossible dreams." The classroom became so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Michael's face burned with shame and anger. His hands clenched into fists under his desk. 24 pairs of eyes stared at him, waiting to see what he would do. Some students looked uncomfortable and embarrassed for him. Others tried to hide their smiles behind their hands. A few whispered quietly to their neighbors. James Worthy's face showed shock and anger at what his friend had just endured. Michael wanted to shout back at her. He wanted to tell her she was wrong and mean and unfair. But his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Always show respect to your teachers, even when they don't deserve it." Instead, Michael stood perfectly still. His jaw was tight and his eyes blazed with determination. He looked direct at Mrs. Whitfield and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." But inside his heart, something changed forever. A fire started burning that would never go out. He made a silent promise to himself right there in that classroom. One day, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield would know his name. One day she would see him on television and remember this moment. One day he would prove her wrong in a way she could never forget. Mrs. Whitfield seemed satisfied with his quiet response. She moved on to the next student as if nothing important had happened. But Michael barely heard the rest of the class discussion. His mind was racing with thoughts of basketball courts and championship games. When the bell rang, Michael gathered his books slowly. Other students rushed out to their next classes, but he took his time. He wanted to remember everything about this moment. The smell of chalk, the sound of Mrs. Whitfield's voice, the feeling of being small and powerless. As he walked toward the door, Mrs. Whitfield called out to him, "Michael, I hope you'll think seriously about what I said today. It's important to have realistic expectations in life." Michael stopped and turned around. He looked at her one more time, memorizing her face and her words. "I will remember everything you said today," he replied quietly. "I promise you that." Then he walked out of the classroom and into the hallway. Other students hurried past him, laughing and talking about their weekend plans. But Michael moved slowly, thinking about the promise he had just made. He didn't know it yet, but those cruel words would become the fuel for one of the greatest careers in sports history. Mrs. Whitfield had meant to crush his dreams, but instead, she had given him something more powerful than she could ever imagine. She had given him a reason to never ever give up. Michael walked down the hallway toward his next class, his head held high. Behind him, Mrs. Whitfield erased the blackboard, completely unaware that she had just created a legend. The fire was lit. Now it was time to let it burn. Michael walked straight to the gymnasium after school that day. His mind kept replaying Mrs. Whitfield's words over and over. "Your kind usually do." The phrase made his stomach feel sick and his hands shake with anger. The gym at Laney High School was old, but well kept. The wooden floors gleamed under bright lights. Red and white banners hung from the ceiling, showing past championship years. The smell of sweat and rubber filled the air as students practiced different sports. Coach Clifton "Pop" Herring was setting up cones for basketball drills. He was a kind man with gray hair and a patient smile. Coach Herring had played college basketball years ago and loved teaching the game to young players. "Michael," Coach Herring called out, "you're early today. Everything okay?" Michael grabbed a basketball from the rack. He started dribbling slowly, feeling the familiar bounce against his palm. The sound echoed in the empty gym. "Coach, how good do you think I can get at this game?" Michael asked. Coach Herring stopped what he was doing. He had coached hundreds of players over the years. Most asked about playing time or easy drills, but Michael's question was different. There was something serious in his voice. "Son, you've got natural talent," Coach Herring said honestly. "You're tall, quick, and you understand the game. But talent alone won't get you far. It takes work. Lots and lots of work." Michael nodded. He shot the ball toward the basket. It went through the net with a perfect swish. "What if I worked harder than anyone has ever worked before?" Michael asked. Coach Herring looked at him carefully. Something had changed in Michael's eyes since yesterday. They burned with a new intensity that the coach had never seen before. "Then you might surprise yourself with how far you can go," Coach Herring replied. That evening, Michael rode the bus home to his family's house on Gordon Road. It was a small brick house with a front porch and a tiny backyard. His father's old Buick sat in the driveway, and warm light glowed through the kitchen window. The Jordan family was gathered around the dinner table when Michael walked in. His father, James R. Jordan Sr., wore his work clothes from the General Electric plant. His mother, Dolores, had changed out of her bank uniform into a simple dress. His younger siblings Larry, Dolores, and Roslyn were talking about their school day. "How was school, Michael?" his mother asked as she passed him a plate of fried chicken and green beans. Michael almost told her about Mrs. Whitfield. The words were right there in his throat, ready to spill out. But something stopped him. He didn't want his parents to worry. He didn't want them to march up to school and cause a scene. This was his fight to win. "It was fine, Mama," Michael said quietly. But Dolores Jordan knew her son better than anyone. She saw the tight line of his jaw and the way he pushed his food around his plate without eating much. "You sure everything's all right, baby?" she asked gently. Michael looked up at his mother's caring face. She worked so hard to provide for their family. His father put in long hours at the plant to pay their bills. They taught him to be respectful, honest, and kind. They deserved better than having their son called names by ignorant people. "Yes, ma'am. Everything's fine," Michael repeated. After dinner, Michael went to his small bedroom. He shared it with his brother Larry, who was already a plea. Michael lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Mrs. Whitfield's voice echoed in his mind. "Basketball won't put food on your table." But Michael had read about professional basketball players. He knew they made good money playing the game they loved. He had watched NBA games on television and dreamed of wearing those colorful uniforms. "Maybe you should consider being a janitor like your kind usually do." Those words hurt the most. Michael's grandfather had worked as a janitor to support his family. It was honest work, just like Mrs. Whitfield said. But why did she think that was the only job he could do? Why couldn't he dream bigger? Michael made a decision that night. He would show Mrs. Whitfield and everyone else who doubted him. He would work harder than any player had ever worked before. He would make the varsity basketball team, get a college scholarship, and play in the NBA. Then Mrs. Whitfield would see him on television. She would remember the boy she tried to crush, and she would know she had been wrong. The next morning, Michael's alarm clock buzzed at 5 o'clock. His brother Larry groaned and pulled his pillow over his head. "Why are you getting up so early?" Larry mumbled. "I've got work to do," Michael whispered back. Michael dressed quickly in shorts and a t-shirt. He grabbed his basketball and sneaked out of the house while his family slept. The October air was cold and crisp. Streetlights still glowed in the early morning darkness. He jogged 6 blocks to MP Park. It was a small neighborhood court with chain nets and cracked concrete. But it had a basketball hoop, and that was all Michael needed. For the next hour, Michael practiced by himself. He shot free throws until his arms ached. He dribbled with his left hand until it felt as natural as his right. He ran sprints from one end of the court to the other until his lungs burned. When the sun started to rise, Michael jogged home. His family was just waking up when he walked through the front door, sweaty and tired but determined. "Where have you been?" his mother asked with concern. "Just getting some exercise, Mama," Michael replied. This became Michael's new routine. Every morning at 5 o'clock, he went to MP Park to practice. Every afternoon after school, he stayed late in the gym with Coach Herring. Every evening he did his homework with extra care, especially his English assignments. Michael was determined to prove Mrs. Whitfield wrong in every way possible. He would excel at basketball, but he would also excel in the classroom. She would never be able to say he was just a dumb athlete who didn't care about learning. 3 weeks into this new routine, Michael faced his biggest test yet. Coach Herring posted the varsity basketball team roster on the gymnasium door. Michael had worked so hard and improved so much that he felt confident about making the team. He pushed through the crowd of students gathered around the list. His eyes scanned the names from top to bottom. Johnson, Miller, Peterson, Smith. Michael's heart sank. His name wasn't there. Leroy Smith, a player who was taller but not as skilled, had made the team instead. Michael stared at the list in disbelief. How could this happen? He had worked harder than anyone. He had improved his game every single day. Coach Herring appeared beside him. The older man's face showed sympathy and understanding. "Michael, I'm sorry," Coach Herring said quietly. "The varsity coach thinks you need another year to develop. You're going to play junior varsity this season." Michael felt like he had been punched in the stomach again. First Mrs. Whitfield's cruel words, now this rejection. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was fooling himself with impossible dreams. But then Michael remembered the promise he had made in that English classroom. He thought about Mrs. Whitfield's satisfied smile when she told him to be realistic. He imagined her laughing if she heard about him getting cut from the varsity team. No, he would not give her that satisfaction. Michael looked at Coach Herring with new determination burning in his eyes. "Coach, I'm going to work twice as hard now," Michael said firmly. "Next year, they won't be able to keep me off that varsity team." Coach Herring smiled. He had seen many players get cut and give up completely. But Michael Jordan was different. The fire in his heart was stronger than any disappointment. "I believe you will, son," Coach Herring replied. "I believe you will." That night, Michael went to bed earlier than usual. He needed his rest, because tomorrow he would start working even harder. Mrs. Whitfield had lit a fire inside him. Getting cut from varsity had only made it burn brighter. He closed his eyes and pictured himself wearing a professional basketball uniform. Thousands of people cheered his name. Television cameras captured his every move. And somewhere in the crowd, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield watched in amazement at what the boy she had tried to break had become. The fire was burning hotter than ever. Winter came early to Wilmington in 1978. Cold winds blew off the Cape Fear River, making the morning air bite at Michael's face as he jogged to MP Park. But nothing could stop him now. Rain, snow, or freezing temperatures, Michael practiced every single morning at 5 o'clock. His routine never changed. Wake up before dawn, grab his basketball, run 6 blocks to the park, practice for 1 hour, jog home, shower, eat breakfast, go to school. At school, Michael's days became more challenging. He was now in his junior year and taking advanced English with Mrs. Whitfield again. The woman who had crushed his dreams sat behind her desk every morning, grading papers with the same cold expression. Michael had grown 3 inches over the summer. He was now 6 feet 3 inches tall and much stronger. His voice had deepened, and his shoulders had filled out from all the basketball practice. But Mrs. Whitfield treated him exactly the same way as before. "Mr. Jordan," she would say during class discussions, "I hope you're paying attention to your studies instead of daydreaming about sports." Michael would nod politely and say, "Yes, ma'am." But inside, his determination grew stronger every day. He made sure to get perfect scores on every test and assignment. He wanted Mrs. Whitfield to see that he was not just a good athlete, but also a smart student. During lunch break, Michael and James Worthy would sit together and talk about their basketball dreams. James had made the varsity team as a junior, which made Michael happy for his friend, but also more determined to join him next year. "You should have seen Coach Smith at our game last week," James said excitedly. "He was there watching me play." "Dean Smith from the University of North Carolina." Michael smiled at his friend's excitement. Dean Smith was the most famous college basketball coach in the state. Everyone knew that playing for Coach Smith meant you had a chance to win championships, and maybe even play in the NBA someday. "That's great, James," Michael said. "Maybe he'll come watch both of us play next year." James looked at his friend with respect. Most players would be jealous if their teammate got attention from a famous coach. But Michael genuinely wanted his friends to succeed. He believed there was room for everyone to achieve their dreams. After school, Michael went to junior varsity practice with Coach Fred Lynch. Coach Lynch was younger than Coach Herring and had played college basketball at a small school in South Carolina. He immediately recognized Michael's special talent. "Jordan, I've never seen a player improve as fast as you have," Coach Lynch said after practice one day. "What are you doing differently?" Michael wiped sweat from his face with a towel. "I just practice every morning before school, Coach. Nothing special, but it was special." Michael's morning routine at MP Park was unlike anything other players did. He practiced shooting from every spot on the court. He worked on dribbling with both hands until it became automatic. He ran sprints and did jumping exercises to get stronger and faster. The junior varsity season began in December. Michael dominated every game. He scored 25 points per game and grabbed 10 rebounds. He made passes that left fans amazed. Local newspapers started writing about the incredible sophomore who was too good for JV basketball. But Michael's favorite moments came when he saw varsity players and coaches watching his games. Word was spreading that something special was happening on the junior varsity team. One cold January evening, the varsity team had just finished their game. Michael's JV team was warming up for their game afterward. As Michael practiced his shooting, he noticed someone standing near the gymnasium entrance. Mrs. Whitfield was there, wearing a heavy winter coat and holding a cup of hot coffee. She was watching him practice with the same cold expression she wore in English class. Their eyes met across the gymnasium. Michael held her gaze for a long moment, then deliberately made 3 perfect shots in a row. He wanted her to see how wrong she had been about his basketball abilities. Mrs. Whitfield turned and left without saying a word, but Michael knew she had gotten his message. The JV team won their game that night by 30 points. Michael scored 32 points and had 12 rebounds. The crowd cheered every time he touched the ball. Local college scouts had started coming to watch him play. After the game, Michael's parents waited for him outside the locker room. His father, James Sr., had left work early to attend the game. His mother, Dolores, beamed with pride as other parents congratulated them on their son's performance. "Michael, you played like a man possessed out there," his father said with a huge smile. "Where does all that energy come from?" Michael thought about telling his parents the truth. He wanted to explain about Mrs. Whitfield's cruel words and how they motivated him every single day. But he decided to keep that fire burning inside himself. "I just love playing basketball, Dad," Michael replied. "I want to be the best player I can be." At home that night, Michael did his homework at the kitchen table. He had a big English assignment due the next day, a 5-page essay about overcoming obstacles. Michael wrote about athletes who had faced challenges and worked hard to succeed. He did not mention Miss Whitfield directly, but every word was inspired by what she had said to him. The next morning at 5 o'clock, Michael was back at MP Park in the freezing cold. His breath made clouds in the winter air as he practiced his shooting. His hands were red and numb, but he refused to quit. He thought about all the people who had doubted him. Mrs. Whitfield, who said he should be a janitor. The varsity coach who said he wasn't ready. Even some kids at school who whispered that he was just lucky to be tall. But Michael also thought about the people who believed in him. Coach Lynch, who pushed him to be better every day. James Worthy, who celebrated his successes. His parents, who never missed a game when they could help it. Most importantly, Michael thought about the promise he had made to himself in Mrs. Whitfield's classroom. He would prove her wrong. He would make her remember his name. He would show the world that dreams were not impossible if you were willing to work for them. By February, college scouts came to every JV game. They took notes and whispered to each other about the amazing young player. Roy Williams, an assistant coach from the University of North Carolina, introduced himself to Michael after one game. "Son, Coach Smith and I have been hearing great things about you," Coach Williams said with a friendly smile. "We'd like to stay in touch as you develop." Michael shook hands with the famous coach, trying to stay calm and respectful. Inside, his heart was racing with excitement. The University of North Carolina was interested in him. That night, Michael called his grandmother to share the good news. She had always believed in his basketball dreams, even when others doubted him. "Grandma, a coach from UNC wants to keep watching me play," Michael said proudly. "Baby, I always knew you were special," his grandmother replied. "But remember, success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right." Those words stuck with Michael as he continued his grueling routine. Every morning at MP Park, every afternoon at practice, every evening, doing homework and getting stronger. The fire that Mrs. Whitfield had lit was now a blazing inferno. Michael had grown from an angry, hurt teenager into a focused, determined young man. He was no longer playing basketball just to prove his teacher wrong. He was playing because he loved the game and because he truly believed he could be great at it. But still, late at night when he closed his eyes, Michael pictured that moment when Mrs. Whitfield would see him succeed beyond her wildest imagination. That day was coming closer with every practice, every game, every perfect shot. The grind continued. The fire burned brighter, and Michael Jordan was just getting started. By the time senior year arrived in August 1980, Michael had grown to 6 feet 6 inches tall. His body was lean and muscular from 3 years of intense training. When he walked through the halls of Laney High School, younger students stopped to stare at the famous basketball player who had brought attention to their small school. The local newspaper, the Wilmington Morning Star, had written several articles about Michael during the summer. College coaches from across the country were calling Coach Herring every week. Everyone in Wilmington knew that something special was happening at their high school. But the person Michael most wanted to impress still treated him the same way she always had. Mrs. Whitfield was now his advanced placement English teacher. The class was designed for the smartest students who wanted to earn college credit while still in high school. Michael had worked hard to qualify for the challenging course. On the first day of school, Mrs. Whitfield stood at the front of the classroom with her usual stern expression. She was now 47 years old, with more gray in her hair, but her cold attitude toward Michael had never changed. "This class will require serious dedication," she announced to the 20 students who had made the grade. "I expect excellence from everyone, regardless of their other activities or interests." Her eyes found Michael in the second row. The message was clear. She still didn't think basketball players could be serious students. Michael had prepared for this moment all summer. He had read extra books and practiced his writing skills. He was determined to earn the highest grade in her class while also dominating on the basketball court. The basketball season began in November. With huge excitement, Michael was now the star of the varsity team, wearing number 23. Coach Herring had moved up to become the head varsity coach, and he built the entire offense around Michael's incredible abilities. In the first game against New Hanover High School, Michael scored 42 points. The gymnasium was packed with fans who had come to see the local legend play. College scouts filled an entire section of the bleachers, taking notes and talking quietly among themselves. After the game, reporters from 3 different newspapers interviewed Michael. He answered every question politely and gave credit to his teammates. But when one reporter asked what motivated him to work so hard, Michael's answer surprised everyone. "There are people who told me I couldn't do this," Michael said carefully. "I want to prove that hard work and determination can overcome any obstacle." He didn't mention Mrs. Whitfield by name, but she was standing near the gymnasium exit when he said those words. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she turned and walked away without expression. In the classroom, the battle continued every day. Mrs. Whitfield assigned Michael extra reading assignments and asked him harder questions during discussions. But Michael was ready for every challenge. When she assigned a research paper about American heroes, Michael wrote about Jackie Robinson and how he broke baseball's color barrier. His paper was so well written and thoroughly researched that Mrs. Whitfield had no choice but to give him an A+. "Interesting choice of subject, Mr. Jordan," she said when handing back his paper. "I hope you understand that not everyone can be a pioneer." Michael looked at her directly and replied, "Yes, ma'am. But that won't stop me from trying." The basketball season continued with one amazing performance after another. Michael averaged 29 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists per game. He could score from anywhere on the court, defend against any opponent, and make passes that left crowds gasping in amazement. James Worthy had graduated the year before and was now playing for Coach Dean Smith at the University of North Carolina. He often came back to watch Michael play and always told the same story afterward. "Michael is better now than I was as a college freshman," James would tell reporters. "He's going to be something really special." The biggest game of the season came in March during the state championship tournament. Laney High School made it all the way to the final game against a powerful team from Charlotte. The game was played at the University of North Carolina's campus in Chapel Hill. Over 8,000 people filled Carmichael Auditorium to watch the championship game. Michael's parents sat in the front row, wearing their lucky outfits. Coach Dean Smith was there, along with coaches from Duke University, North Carolina State, and dozens of other colleges. Mrs. Whitfield was also in the crowd, sitting quietly in the upper section with other Laney High School teachers. The game was close and exciting from the beginning. Both teams played their hearts out, knowing this was their last chance to win a state championship. Michael scored 32 points and grabbed 14 rebounds, but Charlotte's team kept fighting back. With 2 minutes left in the game, Charlotte took a 5-point lead. The Laney fans grew quiet as their championship dreams seemed to be slipping away, but Michael refused to give up. He had been preparing for this moment for 4 years, ever since that day in Mrs. Whitfield's classroom, when she told him to be realistic about his future. He stole the ball and made a fast break layup. Then he blocked a shot and passed to a teammate for another score. With 30 seconds left, Michael hit a three-point shot that tied the game and sent the crowd into a frenzy. In overtime, Michael played like a man possessed. He scored 8 more points and made 3 crucial defensive stops. When the final buzzer sounded, Laney High School had won their first state championship in 25 years. Michael collapsed on the court, exhausted but triumphant. His teammates piled on top of him in celebration. The crowd cheered so loud that the building seemed to shake. As Michael stood up and looked into the stands, he saw his parents crying with joy. He saw Coach Herring pumping his fist in victory. He saw college coaches nodding in approval at what they had just witnessed. And in the upper section, he saw Mrs. Whitfield. She was not cheering or celebrating. She simply stared down at him with the same cold expression she had worn for 4 years. Michael raised the championship trophy above his head. He wanted Mrs. Whitfield to see it clearly. He wanted her to remember this moment forever. The boy she had told to become a janitor was now the best high school basketball player in North Carolina. But this was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, Michael received the phone call he had been dreaming about since he was 15 years old. Coach Dean Smith personally called the Jordan house to offer Michael a full scholarship to the University of North Carolina. "Michael, we believe you can help us win a national championship," Coach Smith said over the phone. "We'd be honored to have you join our program." Michael accepted the scholarship on the spot. His mother cried with happiness. His father shook his hand proudly. His younger siblings jumped around the living room in excitement. At school the next day, the announcement was made over the loudspeaker during morning classes. Students cheered in the hallways. Teachers congratulated Michael wherever he went. In advanced placement English class, Mrs. Whitfield made no mention of Michael's scholarship. She continued teaching about American literature as if nothing important had happened. But when class ended and other students filed out, Mrs. Whitfield called Michael to her desk. "Congratulations on your scholarship, Mr. Jordan," she said in her usual flat tone. Michael stood respectfully and waited for her to continue. "I hope you remember to focus on your education while you're in college," she added. "Basketball won't last forever." Michael looked at his teacher one final time. He thought about all the cruel words she had spoken. He remembered every slight, every discouraging comment, every attempt to crush his dreams. "Thank you for the advice, Mrs. Whitfield," Michael said calmly. "I'll remember everything you've taught me." Then he walked out of her classroom for the last time as a high school student. He had proven her wrong about his basketball abilities and his academic talents. But Michael knew his real victory was still waiting somewhere in the future. The fire she had lit 4 years ago was now burning brighter than ever, and Michael Jordan was ready to take it with him to Chapel Hill, where even bigger dreams were waiting to come true. August 1981 was hot and humid in North Carolina. Michael drove his family's old station wagon onto the beautiful campus of the University of North Carolina. Ancient oak trees lined the walkways between red brick buildings. Students played frisbee on grassy lawns while others studied under shady spots. Everything about Chapel Hill felt magical to Michael. This was where he would spend the next 4 years learning from the greatest college basketball coach in America. This was where he would take the next step toward his impossible dream. Michael parked outside Granville Towers, the tall dormitory where basketball players lived. His parents helped him carry boxes of clothes and books up to the 8th floor. His roommate was Buzz Peterson, a guard from Asheville who had also been a star in high school. "Welcome to Carolina, Michael," Buzz said with a friendly smile. "I've been reading about you in the newspapers all summer." Michael liked Buzz immediately. He was quiet and serious about basketball. Just like Michael, they would become close friends over the next 4 years. After his parents left, Michael unpacked his few belongings. He didn't have much: some clothes, his high school yearbooks, and a small collection of books. But hidden in the bottom of his suitcase was a newspaper clipping from the Wilmington Morning Star. It showed a picture of him holding the state championship trophy. He had cut out the article not because he was proud of winning, but because of one small detail in the background. If you looked closely at the crowd, you could see Mrs. Whitfield sitting in the upper section with her arms crossed and no expression on her face. Michael taped a clipping inside his closet door where only he could see it. Every morning when he got dressed, he would remember why he was working so hard. The first team meeting was held in Coach Dean Smith's office. Michael had heard stories about the legendary coach for years, but meeting him in person was still exciting. Coach Smith was tall and dignified, with gray hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. "Gentlemen, welcome to Carolina basketball," Coach Smith said to the new players. "Our goal is simple. We want to win a national championship. But we'll do it the right way, with hard work, teamwork, and respect for each other." Michael listened carefully to every word. He was the youngest player on the team at 18 years old. The older players included James Worthy, who was now a junior, and Sam Perkins, a talented sophomore center. "Jordan," Coach Smith said, looking directly at Michael, "I know you were a star in high school, but college basketball is different. Everyone here was a star in high school. You'll have to earn your playing time just like everyone else." Michael nodded respectfully. He had expected this challenge. Nothing had ever been given to him easily, and he didn't want it to start now. Practice began the next day at 6 in the morning. The team practiced in Carmichael Auditorium, the same building where Michael had won his state championship just months before. But now he was wearing Carolina blue instead of Laney red and white. Coach Smith's practices were the hardest Michael had ever experienced. Every drill was designed to make players think as well as move. The famous Carolina way emphasized teamwork, smart decisions, and never giving up no matter what the score. Michael struggled at first. He was used to being the best player on his team and having the ball in his hands whenever he wanted it. At Carolina, he had to learn to play within a system and trust his teammates. "Jordan, you're trying to do too much," Coach Smith said after one difficult practice. "Basketball is a team sport. Your job is to make everyone around you better." These words reminded Michael of something his grandmother had told him years ago. Success wasn't just about proving people wrong. It was about proving yourself right. Maybe his job wasn't just to become a great individual player, but to help his team win championships. The basketball season began in November with Michael coming off the bench as the sixth man. This was frustrating at first because he was used to being a starter. But Coach Smith explained that the team needed his energy and scoring when the starters got tired. Michael accepted his role and worked harder than ever in practice. He studied game film for hours, learning how college defenses worked. He lifted weights to get stronger. He practiced his shooting until his form was perfect. During one game against Duke University, Carolina's biggest rival, Michael came off the bench and scored 22 points in just 18 minutes. The crowd at Carmichael Auditorium went crazy every time he touched the ball. Even the Duke fans had to admire his incredible athletic ability. After the game, a reporter asked Michael how it felt to be playing so well as a freshman. "I'm just trying to help my team win games," Michael said humbly. "Individual statistics don't matter if we don't reach our team goals." But privately, Michael still thought about Mrs. Whitfield's words from time to time. He wondered if she watched Carolina games on television. He wondered if she remembered the boys she had told to become a janitor. In the classroom, Michael studied communications and maintained good grades. College was much harder than high school, but he had learned good study habits from years of trying to impress Mrs. Whitfield with his academic work. His favorite class was public speaking, where he learned to express his ideas clearly and confidently. The professor, Dr. Richard Cole, noticed that Michael had natural leadership abilities. "Mr. Jordan, you have a gift for inspiring people," Dr. Cole said after one particularly good presentation. "Whatever career you choose, remember that communication skills are just as important as talent." Michael appreciated the encouragement. He was starting to understand that success required many different skills, not just athletic ability. As the season continued, Michael's role on the team grew larger. By February, he was starting some games and averaging 15 points per game. Sports writers began calling him one of the most exciting freshmen in college basketball. But the real test came in March, during the NCAA's tournament. Carolina had earned the #1 seed in their region and was expected to make it to the Final Four. Michael had dreamed about playing in this tournament since he was a little boy. The first few games were relatively easy wins for Carolina. Michael played well but didn't dominate, focusing on doing whatever Coach Smith asked him to do. His teammates appreciated his unselfish attitude and began trusting him in crucial moments. Then came the national championship game on March 29, 1982. Carolina was playing Georgetown University in the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. Over 60,000 fans filled the enormous arena, and millions more watched on television across the country. Georgetown had a dominant center named Patrick Ewing, who blocked shots and intimidated opponents. Their coach, John Thompson, had built a tough physical team that made other teams uncomfortable. The game was everything Michael had dreamed it would be: fast, physical, and decided by small margins. Both teams played incredible defense, making every basket feel like a victory. With 2 minutes left, Georgetown led by 6 points. Carolina's championship dreams seemed to be slipping away. Coach Smith called timeout and looked directly at his freshman guard. "Michael, we need you to take over this game," Coach Smith said calmly. "Don't think about making mistakes. Just play your game." Michael nodded and ran back onto the court. This was the moment he had been preparing for since that day in Mrs. Whitfield's classroom. All the early morning practices, all the disappointments, all the doubts had led to this single moment. He scored 4 quick points to cut Georgetown's lead to 2. Then he made a steal that led to a teammate's basket. With 15 seconds left, the score was tied at 61. Georgetown had the ball and was trying to run down the clock for a final shot, but Michael anticipated their play perfectly and knocked the ball loose. James Worthy grabbed it and called timeout with 2 seconds remaining. Coach Smith drew up a play during the timeout. The ball would go to Michael on the left wing. If he had an open shot, he should take it. If not, he should pass to an open teammate. "Trust your instincts, Michael," Coach Smith said as they broke the huddle. "You've been preparing for this moment your whole life." The referee handed the ball to the Carolina player for the inbound pass. Michael ran to his spot and caught the ball cleanly. Georgetown's defender was close, but not close enough. Michael rose into the air and released the ball with perfect form. Time seemed to stop as the ball arced toward the basket. 60,000 people held their breath. The ball went through the net with a perfect swish. Carolina had won the national championship. Michael Jordan, the freshman who had been told to become a janitor, had just hit the most important shot in college basketball. His teammates rushed to celebrate with him, but Michael's first thought was about home. He wondered if Mrs. Whitfield had watched the game. He wondered if she remembered her words from 4 years ago, as confetti fell from the ceiling and cameras flashed all around him. Michael smiled and raised his arms in victory. But the fire inside him was still burning. This was just the beginning of proving her wrong. There were much bigger stages waiting ahead. The cold Chicago wind whipped through the streets as Michael stepped off the airplane at O'Hare Airport in October 1984. He was 21 years old now, having left the University of North Carolina after his junior year to enter the NBA draft. The Chicago Bulls had selected him 3rd overall, behind Hakeem Olajuwon and Sam Bowie. Chicago was unlike any place Michael had ever lived. The city was huge, loud, and filled with passionate sports fans who had been waiting years for something to cheer about. The Bulls had been one of the worst teams in the NBA, playing in front of empty seats at Chicago Stadium. Michael's first apartment was a simple 1-bedroom place on the north side of the city. As he unpacked his belongings, he found the old newspaper clipping from his high school championship. Mrs. Whitfield's face was barely visible in the crowd, but Michael could still see her clearly. He taped the clipping to his bathroom mirror, where he would see it every morning while getting ready. 6 years had passed since that day in her English classroom, but the fire she had lit was still burning strong. The first person Michael met with the Bulls was the general manager, Rod Thorne. Mr. Thorne was honest about the team's situation. "Michael, I'll be straight with you," Mr. Thorne said in his office. "This team has been struggling for years. The fans have lost interest. We need someone who can change everything." Michael looked out the window at the busy Chicago streets. Thousands of people were going about their daily lives, most of them probably unaware that the Chicago Bulls even existed. "I understand, Mr. Thorne," Michael replied. "I didn't come here to be average. I came here to win." But before Michael could focus entirely on basketball, he had to make one of the biggest decisions of his life. 3 shoe companies wanted to sign him to endorsement deals: Converse, Adidas, and a small company called Nike. Michael had always worn Converse shoes and expected to sign with them. Adidas was the biggest athletic company in the world at the time. Nike was known mainly for running shoes and was not considered a serious competitor in basketball. But Nike made an offer that changed everything. They offered Michael his own signature shoe line, something that had never been given to a basketball player before. They also offered him stock in the company and a percentage of all shoe sales. Michael's parents flew to Chicago to help him make the decision. They sat around his small kitchen table with contracts spread out in front of them. "Son," "This Nike deal sounds too good to be true," his father said carefully. "Are you sure they can deliver on all these promises?" Michael thought about Mrs. Whitfield's words from years ago. She had told him that basketball wouldn't put food on his table. Now he had companies offering him millions of dollars just to wear their shoes. "Dad, sometimes you have to take chances on people who believe in you," Michael said. "Nike believes I can help them compete with the bigger companies." Michael signed with Nike, creating a partnership that would eventually become worth billions of dollars. The first Air Jordan shoes were scheduled to be released in April 1985 during his rookie season. But first, Michael had to prove he belonged in the NBA. The league was filled with grown men who had been playing professional basketball for years. Many veteran players resented rookies who received attention and money before proving themselves. The Bulls' first practice was held at the Multiplex, a small gym in the suburbs. Michael walked into the facility wearing his new Nike shoes and carrying a gym bag his mother had packed with towels and extra clothes. The other Bulls players looked at him suspiciously. They had read newspaper articles about his college success and his big Nike contract. Some thought he was just another overhyped rookie who would struggle against NBA competition. "So you're the savior," said Orlando Woolridge, a veteran forward. "Let's see what you can do against real players." Michael didn't respond with words. Instead, he let his play do the talking. From the first drill, it was obvious that he was different from other rookies. He moved faster, jumped higher, and saw plays develop before they happened. Coach Kevin Loughery watched in amazement as Michael dominated scrimmages against veteran players. After just 1 week of practice, Coach Loughery knew he had something special. "I've coached a lot of players over the years," Coach Loughery told reporters before the season started. "But I've never seen anyone with Michael's combination of talent and drive. He plays like his life depends on every possession." The Bulls' first game of the season was against the Washington Bullets on October 26, 1984. Michael was nervous but excited as he walked into Chicago Stadium for his NBA debut. The arena was old and loud, with steep seats that brought fans close to the action. Only about half the seats were filled, but the fans who came were curious about the young rookie they had been reading about. Michael wore number 23, the same number he had worn in high school and college. From his first shot, Michael showed that he belonged in the NBA. He scored 16 points, grabbed six DBOs, and made 7 assists. More importantly, the Bulls won the game, something that hadn't happened very often in recent years. After the game, Michael called his parents from his apartment. His mother answered the phone, and he could hear the pride in her voice. "How did it feel, baby?" Dolores Jordan asked. "It felt like home, Mama," Michael replied. "Like this is what I was meant to do." But Michael also thought about Wilmington that night. He wondered if Mrs. Whitfield had seen the game on television. He wondered if she remembered her words about basketball not putting food on his table. As the season continued, Michael's impact on the Bulls became obvious to everyone. Attendance at Chicago Stadium began increasing as fans came to see the amazing rookie play. Local newspapers wrote stories about his incredible athletic ability and competitive fire. Michael averaged 28 points per game during his rookie season, more than any first-year player had scored in over 20 years. He made shots that seemed impossible and played defense with an intensity that surprised veteran players. But what impressed coaches and teammates most was Michael's work ethic. He was always the first player to arrive at practice and the last to leave. He studied game film for hours, learning how NBA defenses worked. "I've never seen anyone work as hard as Michael," said Bulls assistant coach Johnny Bach. "He practices like every drill is the most important thing in the world." During one game against the Boston Celtics, Michael scored 37 points against the best defensive team in the NBA. After the game, Celtics star Larry Bird made a comment that shocked everyone. "That's not a player," Bird told reporters. "That's God disguised as Michael Jordan." The quote appeared in newspapers across the country. Michael Jordan was no longer just a promising rookie. He was becoming a superstar. By February, Michael was selected to play in his first NBA All-Star game. He was the youngest player chosen and felt honored to compete against the best players in the world. During All-Star Weekend, a reporter asked Michael what motivated him to play with such intensity every night. Michael paused, thinking about Mrs. Whitfield's classroom and the promise he had made to himself. "There are people who doubted me along the way," Michael said carefully. "I want to prove that with hard work and dedication, you can achieve anything you set your mind to." The first Air Jordan shoes were released in April 1985, near the end of Michael's rookie season. They were black and red with white accents, colors that had never been used on basketball shoes before. The NBA initially banned them for not meeting uniform requirements, but Nike turned this into a marketing opportunity. They banned them from the NBA, Nike's advertisement said, which means you better wear them. The shoes became an instant success. Young people across America wanted to wear the same shoes as the exciting rookie who was changing basketball. Michael finished his rookie season by winning the Rookie of the Year award. He'd averaged 28.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 5.9 assists per game. More importantly, he had transformed the Bulls from a boring team into one of the most exciting attractions in sports. At the award ceremony, Michael thanked his coaches, teammates, and family. But he also made a comment that few people understood at the time. "This is just the beginning," Michael said into the microphone. "I have much more to prove, and I won't stop until I've accomplished everything I set out to do." That night, alone in his Chicago apartment, Michael looked at the newspaper clipping on his bathroom mirror. Mrs. Whitfield's face stared back at him from the crowd at his high school championship game. He was now a professional athlete making millions of dollars. Exactly what she had said was impossible. But Michael knew this was still not enough. He wanted to become the greatest player who ever lived. Then Mrs. Whitfield would have to remember his name. Then she would understand how wrong she had been about him. The fire was burning brighter than ever, and Michael Jordan was just getting started on the biggest stage in basketball. The years between 1985 and 1991 flew by like a blur of incredible performances and crushing disappointments. Michael had become the most famous basketball player in the world, but the one thing he wanted most still escaped him: an NBA championship. In his second season, disaster struck early. During the third game of the year, Michael broke his foot during a practice. The injury was serious enough to keep him out for most of the season. Doctors said he might miss the entire year. Michael sat in his Chicago apartment with his foot in a cast, watching other teams play on television. For the first time since Mrs. Whitfield's classroom, he felt truly helpless. He couldn't practice, couldn't play, couldn't prove anything to anyone. But even with a broken foot, Michael's determination never wavered. He spent hours each day doing upper body workouts and studying game film. He learned every opponent's strengths and weaknesses, preparing for his return. When he came back for the playoffs that spring, Michael was hungrier than ever. In the first round against the Boston Celtics, he played like a man possessed. In Game 2, he scored 63 points, the most anyone had ever scored in a playoff game. Larry Bird, the Celtics superstar, shook his head in amazement after the game. "I think it's just God disguised as Michael Jordan," he told reporters. But the Bulls still lost the series. Michael's individual brilliance wasn't enough to overcome the Celtics' teamwork and experience. As he walked off the court after the final loss, Michael made another promise to himself. He would never lose like this again. The 1986-87 season was when Michael truly announced himself as the best player in basketball. He averaged 37 points per game, the most anyone had scored since Wilt Chamberlain in the 1960s. He won his first scoring title and dazzled fans with incredible dunks and impossible shots. The Bulls made the playoffs again, but once more they fell short of a championship. The Detroit Pistons had built a physical, aggressive team specifically designed to stop Michael Jordan. They called themselves the Bad Boys and used rough tactics to frustrate him. "He's just one player," Pistons guard Isaiah Thomas said to reporters. "We have 5 guys who can make him work for every shot." The Pistons' strategy worked. They knocked the Bulls out of the playoffs in 1988, 1989, and 1990. Each loss was more painful than the last. Michael would sit in the locker room afterward, thinking about Mrs. Whitfield's words and wondering if he would ever be good enough to win a championship. During this time, Michael's life away from basketball was changing too. He married Juanita Vanoy in 1989, and they had their first child, Jeffrey Jordan, in 1988. Michael built a beautiful mansion in Highland Park, Illinois, with a full basketball court in the backyard. He had achieved wealth and fame beyond anything Mrs. Whitfield could have imagined. His Air Jordan shoes were selling millions of pairs each year. He appeared in movies and commercials, becoming as famous as any movie star or musician. But none of this satisfied the fire burning inside him. Michael still remembered every word Mrs. Whitfield had spoken in that classroom. He could still see her cold expression at his high school championship game. Until he won an NBA championship, he wouldn't feel like he had truly proven her wrong. In 1989, the Bulls hired a new head coach named Phil Jackson. Coach Jackson was different from other NBA coaches. He studied Eastern philosophy and taught his players about meditation and mental focus. He believed basketball was as much about the mind as it was about physical ability. "Michael, you're the most talented player I've ever seen," Coach Jackson told him during their first meeting. "But talent alone won't win championships. You need to trust your teammates and play within a system." These words reminded Michael of his college days with Coach Dean Smith. He had learned to be unselfish at North Carolina. But the NBA's individual focus had made him try to do everything himself. Coach Jackson introduced a new offense called the triangle system. It required all 5 players to work together, moving the ball and creating open shots for whoever had the best opportunity. At first, Michael resisted giving up control. "Coach, I can score whenever I want," Michael said during one frustrating practice. "Why should I pass the ball to players who might miss?" Coach Jackson smiled patiently. "Because 5 players working together will always beat 1 player working alone, no matter how talented he is." Slowly, Michael began to understand. He started trusting his teammates more and looking for ways to make them better players. Scottie Pippen, a young forward from Arkansas, became his closest partner on the court. Horace Grant provided strength and rebounding in the paint. The 1990-91 season was when everything finally came together. Michael had learned to balance his individual brilliance with team play. He was still the Bulls' best player, but now he made everyone around him better too. The Bulls won 61 games during the regular season, the most in franchise history. Michael won his 2nd MVP award and led the league in scoring for the 5th straight year. But more importantly, he had built the most complete team he had ever played with. The playoffs began with easy victories over the New York Knicks and Philadelphia 76ers. Then came the Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons, the team that had crushed Michael's championship dreams for 3 straight years. This time was different. Michael had grown stronger mentally and physically. His teammates were more experienced and confident. The Bulls swept the Pistons in 4 straight games, finally breaking through the barrier that had stopped them for so long. After the final victory, Michael collapsed on the court and began crying tears of joy and relief. His father rushed down from the stands to embrace him. All the years of disappointment and frustration poured out in that moment. But Michael wasn't finished yet. The Bulls still had to win the NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers to claim their first championship. The Lakers were led by Magic Johnson, one of the greatest players in basketball history. The finals were played in June 1991, 9 years after Michael had hit his championship shot at North Carolina. He was now 28 years old and at the peak of his abilities. This was his chance to prove that he could win the biggest prize in basketball. The Bulls won the series in 5 games, with Michael averaging 31 points, 6 rebounds and 11 assists per game. When the final buzzer sounded in Game 5, Michael grabbed the championship trophy and held it above his head. For the first time in his professional career, Michael Jordan was a champion. He thought about calling Mrs. Whitfield that night. He imagined picking up the phone and asking if she had watched the finals on television. He wanted to ask if she remembered telling him that basketball wouldn't put food on his table. But Michael decided to wait. One championship wasn't enough. He wanted to become the greatest player who ever lived. He wanted his name to be remembered forever. Then, when his career was finished, he would find Mrs. Whitfield and have the conversation they both knew was coming. The fire was still burning, and Michael Jordan was just getting started. One championship wasn't enough. Michael knew that truly great players won multiple titles, and he was determined to build a dynasty in Chicago. The years between 1991 and 1998 would define his legacy and prove once and for all that Mrs. Whitfield had been completely wrong about his future. The 1991-92 season began with Michael more motivated than ever. He had tasted championship success, and now he wanted more. The Bulls added new pieces to their team, including Dennis Rodman, a colorful rebounder who brought energy and toughness. Michael led the Bulls to 67 wins that season, then dominated the playoffs. They won their 2nd straight championship, beating the Portland Trail Blazers in the finals. Michael averaged 35 points per game in the series and hit 6 three-pointers in the first half of Game 1. After making his 6th three-pointer, Michael shrugged his shoulders at the television cameras. as if to say the shots were so easy that even he was surprised. The image became one of the most famous in sports history. But 1992 also brought Michael his greatest honor yet, selection to the United States Olympic team for the Barcelona Games. The team was nicknamed the Dream Team because it included the best basketball players in the world: Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, and many others. Michael dominated the Olympics, just like he dominated the NBA. The Dream Team won every game by huge margins and became global celebrities. Michael's popularity spread far beyond America, as people around the world fell in love with his incredible athletic ability. In Barcelona, a young fan asked Michael for his autograph and told him in broken English that he was the greatest player ever. Michael smiled and signed the boys' basketball, thinking about how far he had come from that classroom in Wilmington. The Bulls won their third straight championship in 1993, completing their first three-peat. Michael was now being compared to the greatest athletes in history. Newspaper writers called him the best basketball player who ever lived. But just when everything seemed perfect, tragedy struck Michael's family in the worst possible way. On July 23, 1993, Michael's father, James R. Jordan Sr., was murdered during a robbery while sleeping in his car on the side of a highway in North Carolina. The man who had supported Michael's dreams and attended his games was gone forever. Michael was devastated. His father had been his best friend and closest advisor. They talked on the phone almost every day, sharing stories about basketball and family life. Now that voice was silent forever. The grief hit Michael harder than any basketball loss ever could. He sat in his mansion in Highland Park, surrounded by championship trophies and awards, feeling empty and lost. What was the point of all this success if he couldn't share it with the person who mattered most? 3 months after his father's death, Michael made a shocking announcement. He was retiring from basketball at age 30 to pursue his father's dream of playing professional baseball. "I've achieved everything I wanted to accomplish in basketball," Michael said at a press conference. "It's time to try something new and honor my father's memory." The sports world was stunned. Michael Jordan, the greatest player alive, was walking away at the peak of his career to chase an impossible dream of making it to Major League Baseball. Michael signed with the Chicago White Sox organization and was assigned to their Double-A team in Birmingham, Alabama. He wore number 45 instead of his famous 23, saying that number belonged to his basketball career. Playing baseball was humbling for Michael. He struck out constantly and struggled to hit even basic pitches. The other players were younger and had been playing baseball their entire lives. Michael was a 31-year-old rookie learning a completely different sport. But Michael approached baseball with the same work ethic he had brought to basketball. He practiced for hours every day, studied video of great hitters, and never complained about his struggles. His Birmingham teammates respected his dedication, even though he clearly didn't belong at their level. After 18 months of baseball, Michael realized that his father would want him to return to his true calling. On March 18, 1995, Michael sent a simple 2-word fax to every sports reporter in America. "I'm back." The announcement sent shockwaves through the sports world. Michael Jordan was returning to basketball with the Chicago Bulls. He would wear number 45 for the rest of that season, but everyone knew that number 23 would return eventually. Michael's first game back was against the Indiana Pacers at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis. He looked rusty at first, missing shots he would normally make easily. But in the fourth quarter, the old Michael Jordan appeared. He scored 19 points in the final period, nearly leading the Bulls to victory. After the game, Michael was asked how it felt to be back on a basketball court. "It felt like I was home again," he said with a huge smile. "This is where I belong." The Bulls made the playoffs that year, but lost to the Orlando Magic in the second round. Michael was disappointed but not discouraged. He had work to do to get back to championship level. That summer, Michael trained harder than ever before. He lifted weights, ran sprints, and practiced shooting for hours each day. When the 1995-96 season began, he was ready to remind everyone why he was the greatest player in the world. The 1995-96 Bulls team was unlike anything basketball had ever seen. They won 72 games during the regular season, the most in NBA history. Michael won his 4th MVP award and led the team to another championship, beating the Seattle Supersonics in the finals. During the championship celebration, Michael collapsed on the locker room floor, clutching the basketball and crying uncontrollably. It was Father's Day and he was thinking about his dad, who would never see another championship. "I know he's watching," Michael said through his tears. "This one's for him." The Bulls won again in 1997 and 1998, giving Michael 6 championships in 8 years. His final shot as a Bull came in Game 6 of the 1998 Finals against the Utah Jazz. With the Bulls trailing by 1 point, Michael stole the ball, then hit a jump shot with 5.2 seconds left to win his 6th championship. As the ball went through the net, Michael held his follow-through pose, knowing it might be his last shot as a Chicago Bull. The image became one of the most famous in sports history. After the 1998 season, Michael retired again. He was 35 years old and had nothing left to prove in basketball. He was universally recognized as the greatest player who ever lived. His career statistics were incredible: 30.1 points per game, 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and 14 All-Star selections. He had transformed basketball from a sport into global entertainment. More importantly for Michael, he had proven every doubter wrong. The boy who was told to become a janitor had become the most famous athlete on earth. His Air Jordan shoes generated billions of dollars in revenue. His name was known in every country around the world. But there was still one conversation Michael needed to have. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield was now 65 years old and had retired from teaching. She still lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, probably watching his games on television and remembering the young man she had tried to discourage. Michael had achieved everything he dreamed about in her classroom 20 years earlier. Now it was time to go home and finish what she had started. The summer of 1999 was hot and humid in North Carolina. Michael drove his black Mercedes down familiar streets in Wilmington, watching how much his hometown had changed since he left for college 18 years ago. New shopping centers had been built where empty lots used to be. Billboards with his face advertised Air Jordan shoes and Gatorade. But some things remained exactly the same. The Cape Fear River still wound through the city. The old oak trees still provided shade along residential streets. And somewhere in this quiet town lived the woman whose cruel words had changed his life forever. Michael pulled into the driveway of his childhood home on Gordon Road. The small brick house looked smaller than he remembered, but his mother Dolores had kept it in perfect condition. She still lived there alone since his father's death, surrounded by photos and memories of her family. "Michael," his mother called out as she opened the front door. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." Michael hugged his mother tightly. At 64 years old, she was still strong and energetic. Her hair was grayer now, and she moved a little slower, but her smile was exactly the same as when he was a teenager. "I decided to come down early, Mama," Michael said. "I wanted to spend some extra time here." They sat on the front porch, drinking sweet tea and watching neighbors work in their gardens. This was the same porch where Coach Dean Smith had recruited him 20 years ago. The same place where his father used to sit and talk about basketball dreams that seemed impossible at the time. "How are you really doing, baby?" his mother asked gently. "I know retirement has been hard for you." Michael had been officially retired from basketball for a year now, but he was still adjusting to life without the game that had defined him for so long. He was only 36 years old and felt like he could still play at the highest level, but he had accomplished everything possible in basketball. "I'm doing okay, Mama," Michael replied, "but there's something I need to take care of while I'm here." Dolores Jordan knew her son better than anyone. She could tell when something was bothering him, and she had noticed a heaviness in his voice during their recent phone calls. "What kind of something?" she asked. Michael stared down the street toward downtown Wilmington. Somewhere in this city was Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, the teacher who had lit the fire that drove him to greatness. For 21 years, he had carried her words with him. Now it was time to let them go. "There's a conversation I need to have," Michael said carefully. "Someone I need to see before I can really move on with my life." His mother didn't ask for details, but Michael could tell she was worried. She had raised him to be respectful and kind, especially to his elders. She trusted that whatever he needed to do, he would do it the right way. The next morning, Michael drove to Laney High School. The building had been renovated and expanded since his graduation, but the original structure remained the same. New wings had been added for science labs and computer classrooms that didn't exist when he was a student. Michael parked in the visitor's lot and walked toward the main entrance. A bronze statue of him making his famous jump shot stood near the front door. The inscription read, "Michael Jordan, Laney High School Class of 1981, never give up on your dreams." Inside the school, the hallways were filled with displays celebrating Michael's career. His old jerseys hung in glass cases. Newspaper clippings from his greatest games covered entire bulletin boards. Photos showed him meeting presidents and winning championships. The principal, Dr. Sandra Williams, gave Michael a tour of the school. She was young enough to have been a student when he played there, and she clearly admired him greatly. "Mr. Jordan, you have no idea what an inspiration you've been to our students," Dr. Williams said as they walked past the gymnasium. "We have kids from all backgrounds who believe they can achieve great things because of your example." The gymnasium had been renamed the Michael Jordan Gymnasium and expanded to hold twice as many fans. Championship banners hung from the ceiling, including the 1981 state title that Michael had helped win. "Dr. Williams," Michael said carefully, "I was wondering if you could help me with something. I'm trying to locate a former teacher who worked here when I was a student." Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. She taught English. Dr. Williams thought for a moment. "Oh yes, Mrs. Whitfield. She retired about 5 years ago. Taught here for over 30 years. Very strict, very traditional. Some students found her challenging, but she was respected by the other teachers." Michael nodded. He remembered her challenges very well. "Would you happen to know how I could contact her?" Michael asked. "I think she still lives here in Wilmington," Dr. Williams replied. "I could probably find her address in our retired teacher files. Is this for some kind of reunion or special event?" Michael smiled politely. "Something like that." That afternoon, Michael sat in his car outside a small brick house on Maple Street, about 10 minutes from his mother's home. According to the information Dr. Williams had provided, this was where Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield had lived for the past 15 years. The house was modest and well-maintained, with a neat front yard and flower gardens along the walkway. An old blue sedan sat in the driveway. Everything about the place seemed quiet and ordinary. Michael sat there for 30 minutes, gathering the courage to knock on her door. What would he say? How would she react? Did she even remember the incident that had shaped his entire life? He thought about all the championships he had won, all the records he had broken, all the money he had earned. He was universally recognized as the greatest basketball player who ever lived. His success had proven Mrs. Whitfield more wrong than she could have ever imagined. But what did he really want from this conversation? An apology? Recognition of how wrong she had been? Or just closure for a 21-year-old wound that had never fully healed? Michael's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his mother. "Michael, where are you?" she asked. "You missed lunch, and I was getting worried." "I'm fine, Mama," Michael replied. "I'm just taking care of that thing I mentioned." "Well, whatever it is, remember what your father always told you. The measure of a man isn't how he handles success, but how he treats people who can't do anything for him." Those words hit Michael deeply. His father had taught him to be respectful and gracious even to people who had hurt him. James R. Jordan Sr. would want his son to handle this situation with dignity and class. "Thanks, Mama," Michael said. "I love you." Michael hung up the phone and looked at Mrs. Whitfield's house one more time. She was probably inside right now, maybe watching television or reading a book. She had no idea that the student she had tried to discourage 21 years ago was sitting outside her home. But Michael decided he wasn't ready for this conversation yet. He needed to think more about what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. This moment was too important to rush. He drove away from Maple Street, but he knew he would be back soon. The fire that had burned inside him for over 2 decades was finally ready to be extinguished. But it had to be done the right way. Michael spent the rest of the week in Wilmington visiting old friends and enjoying time with his mother. He drove past Empey Park, where he had practiced alone at 5 in the morning as a teenager. He ate dinner at restaurants where he used to celebrate victories with his high school teammates. Everyone in town treated him like a hero, which he supposed he was. But Michael knew that his greatest victory was still waiting. It wouldn't happen on a basketball court or in front of thousands of fans. It would happen in a quiet living room, with just 2 people who had unfinished business to settle. On his last day in Wilmington, Michael made his decision. Tomorrow, he would return to Mrs. Whitfield's house. Tomorrow, he would knock on her door. Tomorrow, he would finally have the conversation that had been 21 years in the making. The boy who had been told to become a janitor was ready to face the woman who had created a legend. Michael woke up early on August 15, 1999. The sun was just beginning to rise over Wilmington as he sat on his mother's front porch, drinking coffee and preparing for the most important conversation of his life. This wasn't about basketball anymore. This was about closure, understanding, and finally putting to rest the fire that had burned inside him for 21 years. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Michael drove slowly down Maple Street. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, but his heart was beating faster than it had during any championship game. He parked in front of the small brick house and took a deep breath. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield's yard looked peaceful in the morning sunlight. Pink roses bloomed along her walkway, and a small American flag hung from her front porch. It was hard to imagine that such an ordinary-looking place held the key to understanding his entire career. Michael walked up the concrete steps and rang the doorbell. He could hear footsteps inside, slow and careful. After a moment, the door opened. Mrs. Whitfield stood there, looking older than Michael had imagined. She was now 66 years old, with silver hair and lines around her eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. For a moment, she just stared at him in complete shock. "Michael Jordan," she said quietly, as if she couldn't believe her own words. "Hello, Mrs. Whitfield," Michael replied politely. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I was wondering if we could talk for a few minutes." She stood in her doorway for a long moment, studying his face. Michael could see her mind working, probably trying to figure out why the most famous athlete in the world was standing on her front porch. "Of course," she said finally, stepping aside to let him in. "Please, come inside." The living room was small and tidy, filled with furniture that looked like it had been there for decades. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Family photos sat on end tables, showing children and grandchildren Michael didn't recognize. The television was tuned to a morning news show with the volume turned low. "Can I get you some sweet tea?" Mrs. Whitfield asked, her voice shaking slightly. "That would be nice. Thank you," Michael replied. She disappeared into the kitchen, giving Michael a chance to look around. On one bookshelf, he noticed several books about teaching and education. On another, he saw novels by famous authors they had studied in her English class years ago. Mrs. Whitfield returned with 2 glasses of tea and sat down in a chair across from the couch where Michael was sitting. She seemed nervous and unsure, very different from the confident teacher he remembered. "Mrs. Whitfield," Michael began carefully, "I wanted to talk to you about something that happened in your English class in 1978. I don't know if you remember, but you asked students to share their future plans." Her face changed as Michael spoke. She set down her glass of tea and looked directly at him. He could see recognition in her eyes. "You said you wanted to play professional basketball," she said slowly. "And I told you that wasn't realistic." Michael nodded. "You said basketball wouldn't put food on my table. You suggested I should consider being a janitor like my kind usually do." The words hung in the air between them. Mrs. Whitfield's face went pale, and she looked down at her hands. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember saying those things." Michael had imagined this moment thousands of times over the years. In his mind, she would deny it or make excuses or refuse to acknowledge what she had done. But her honest admission caught him by surprise. "Mrs. Whitfield, those words changed my entire life," Michael said. "Every morning when I got up to practice basketball, I thought about what you said. Every time someone told me I wasn't good enough, I remembered your voice. Every championship I won, every record I broke, every success I achieved, it all started with that moment in your classroom." Mrs. Whitfield looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Michael, I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong about you. And I've regretted those words for over 20 years." This wasn't what Michael had expected either. He thought she would be defensive or proud, not broken and apologetic. "You followed my career?" he asked. Mrs. Whitfield got up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the room. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder, then brought it back to where Michael was sitting. "I kept every newspaper article, every magazine cover, every story about your success," she said, opening the folder. "Look." Michael stared in amazement. The folder contained hundreds of clippings spanning his entire career. His high school state championship, His college success at North Carolina, every NBA achievement, his Olympic gold medals. She had been following his journey the entire time. Why? Michael asked quietly. Mrs. Whitfield sat back down, holding the folder in her lap. Because I needed to remind myself of how wrong I could be about a person. Because I needed to see what determination and hard work could accomplish. And because I was ashamed of what I had said to you. She wiped tears from her eyes before continuing. Michael, I grew up in a different time, with different attitudes. That doesn't excuse what I said, but it explains it. I thought I was being realistic, preparing you for what I saw as the hard facts of life. Instead, I was just showing my own ignorance and prejudice. Michael felt something shifting inside his chest. The anger he had carried for so long was beginning to fade, replaced by something he hadn't expected: understanding. After you graduated and went to North Carolina, I started paying attention to what I was saying to other students. Mrs. Whitfield continued. I realized that my job wasn't to crush dreams, but to help students achieve them. I changed the way I taught because of you. You changed? Michael asked. Mrs. Whitfield nodded. I started encouraging students to dream big, to work hard, to believe in themselves. I told them about you, not your basketball success, but your determination to prove people wrong. You taught me how to be a better teacher. They sat quietly for a moment, both processing the conversation. Michael looked at the folder full of newspaper clippings and realized something important. Mrs. Whitfield hadn't been his enemy all these years. She had been carrying her own burden of regret and shame. Mrs. Whitfield, Michael said finally, I came here today thinking I needed an apology from you. But now I realize that's not what this is about. She looked at him with curiosity. Those words you spoke to me were cruel and wrong, Michael continued. But they also gave me something I might never have found otherwise: an unshakable determination to succeed. In a strange way, you helped make me who I am. Mrs. Whitfield smiled through her tears. Does that mean you can forgive an old woman for her terrible mistake? Michael thought about his father's words about how a man treats people who can't do anything for him. He thought about all the young people who looked up to him and what kind of example he wanted to set. Mrs. Whitfield, I forgave you a long time ago, Michael said. I just didn't know it until today. They talked for another hour about teaching, about dreams, about the power of words to hurt and heal. When Michael finally stood to leave, Mrs. Whitfield walked him to the door. Michael, she said as he stepped onto her front porch, thank you for coming here today, and thank you for proving me wrong in the most beautiful way possible. Michael smiled and shook her hand. Thank you for lighting a fire that burned brighter than either of us could have imagined. As Michael drove away from Maple Street, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight he had carried since 1978 was finally gone. Mrs. Whitfield's cruel words had created a legend, but her heartfelt apology had created something even more valuable: peace. 2 weeks after his conversation with Mrs. Whitfield, Michael sat in his office in Chicago, looking out at the city skyline. The weight he had carried for 21 years was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The fire that had driven him to basketball greatness was finally extinguished, but a new flame was beginning to burn, one focused on helping others overcome their own obstacles. Michael picked up his phone and called his lawyer, David Stern. David, I want to start a foundation, Michael said. Something focused on education and helping young people who face discrimination or doubt. That's a wonderful idea, Michael, David replied. What inspired this decision? Michael smiled, thinking about Mrs. Whitfield's living room and the folder full of newspaper clippings. Let's just say I had a conversation that changed my perspective on a few things. Over the next months, Michael worked with educators and community leaders to create the Jordan Foundation for Educational Excellence. Foundation provided scholarships for students who had been told they weren't smart enough or talented enough to succeed. It also funded programs that trained teachers to encourage rather than discourage their students' dreams. The Foundation's first scholarship recipients were announced in spring 2000. Among them was Marcus Williams, a young man from Detroit whose guidance counselor had told him he wasn't college material. Sarah Chen, a girl from Los Angeles, whose math teacher said girls couldn't excel in science. And James Peterson, a boy from rural Georgia, whose English teacher said he would never be a writer. Each scholarship came with a personal letter from Michael that said simply, Someone once told me I wasn't good enough either. Prove them wrong. Meanwhile, in Wilmington, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield had begun a transformation of her own. Though retired from teaching, she started volunteering at the Wilmington Boys and Girls Club, helping children with their reading and homework. The kids at the club had no idea who she was, or about her connection to Michael Jordan. They just knew her as the kind old lady who helped them with their studies and always encouraged them to work hard. Mrs. Eleanor, a 10-year-old boy named David, asked one afternoon, "Do you think I could be a professional basketball player like Michael Jordan someday?" Mrs. Whitfield looked at the boy, small for his age, with thick glasses and no obvious athletic talent. 25 years earlier, she might have told him to be realistic about his future. Now she had a different response. "David, if you're willing to work harder than anyone else, there's no limit to what you can achieve," she said with a warm smile. Michael Jordan succeeded because he never gave up on his dreams. Neither should you. The boy beamed with excitement and ran off to practice shooting baskets. Mrs. Whitfield watched him go, thinking about how different her teaching had become since that conversation with Michael. In 2001, Michael made another life-changing decision. At 38 years old, he announced he was coming out of retirement to play for the Washington Wizards. Many people thought he was too old, and that he would embarrass himself trying to compete against players half his age. Michael knew he wouldn't be the same player he had been with the Bulls. His knees ached, his reflexes were slower, and his jump shot wasn't as smooth as it once was. But this comeback wasn't about proving his basketball skills anymore. It was about showing young people that age and obstacles couldn't stop someone who refused to give up. During his 2 seasons with the Wizards, Michael played like a teacher on the court. He mentored younger players, showing them how to work hard and handle pressure. He spoke at schools and community centers, sharing his story about overcoming doubt and criticism. "The most important lesson I ever learned," Michael would tell young audiences, "came from someone who told me I wasn't good enough. That person taught me that other people's opinions don't have to become your reality." Michael never mentioned Mrs. Whitfield by name during these speeches, but she watched many of them on television from her small house in Wilmington. Each time he spoke about turning criticism into motivation, she smiled and felt proud that their painful history had become something positive. In April 2003, Michael played his final NBA game at the First Union Center in Philadelphia. As he walked off the court for the last time, the crowd gave him a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. Players from both teams stopped what they were doing to applaud the man who had changed basketball forever. That night, Michael called his mother from his hotel room. "How do you feel, baby?" Dolores Jordan asked. "Are you sad that it's over?" "No, Mama," Michael replied. "I feel grateful. Grateful for all the people who believed in me, and even grateful for the ones who didn't. They all helped make me who I am." After retiring for the final time, Michael focused entirely on his foundation and business ventures. He bought the Charlotte Hornets NBA team, becoming one of the few African-American majority owners in professional sports. He used his position to promote education and create opportunities for young people who had been overlooked by others. The Jordan Foundation grew rapidly, helping thousands of students pursue their dreams despite facing doubt and discrimination. Michael visited schools across the country, sharing his story and encouraging young people to use criticism as fuel for success. In 2004, Michael received news that would close another chapter of his remarkable journey. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield had died peacefully in her sleep at age 71. She had been volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club until just weeks before her death, spending her final years encouraging children to believe in themselves. Michael attended her funeral service at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Wilmington. He sat quietly in the back row, listening as former students and colleagues spoke about how Mrs. Whitfield had changed over her final years. Many mentioned her passion for helping children overcome obstacles and achieve their dreams. After the service, Michael approached Mrs. Whitfield's nephew, Robert, who had delivered the eulogy. "I'm Michael Jordan," he said simply. "Your aunt was my English teacher many years ago." Robert's eyes widened with recognition. "Mr. Jordan, Aunt Eleanor talked about you often in her final years. She said you taught her more about teaching than any education course ever could." Michael smiled sadly. "She taught me quite a bit too." Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "She left this for you. She said if you ever came to pay your respects, I should give it to you." Michael took the envelope with shaking hands. His name was written on the front in Mrs. Whitfield's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message. Dear Michael, thank you for showing me that a teacher's most important job is not to prepare students for the world as it is, but to help them create the world as it should be. Your success gave me the courage to become the teacher I always should have been. The boy I tried to discourage became the man who taught me the true meaning of grace and forgiveness. I am proud to have played a small part in your remarkable journey, even if I played it poorly at first. With deep respect and gratitude, Eleanor Whitfield. P.S. I kept all those newspaper clippings. They're yours now if you want them. Michael folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. As he walked out of the church and into the bright North Carolina sunshine, he felt the final pieces of his journey clicking into place. The cruel words that had launched his career were now balanced by kind words that completed his transformation from athlete to educator, from legend to teacher. Years later, when reporters asked Michael about the source of his incredible motivation, he would smile and give the same answer. Sometimes the people who doubt you the most give you the greatest gift. They teach you that limitations exist only in the minds of those who accept them. Michael never revealed Mrs. Whitfield's name or the details of their story. That remained between them, a private bond between a teacher and student who had both learned that words have the power to hurt, to heal, and ultimately to inspire greatness. The boy who had been told to become a janitor had become the greatest basketball player who ever lived. But more importantly, he had become a man who used his success to lift others up, proving that true legends are measured not by what they achieve, but by what they inspire others to achieve. The fire that began in room 24 of Laney High School had finally burned itself into something beautiful, a legacy of hope that would inspire generations of young people to never give up on their dreams, no matter who tells them they aren't good enough. From a humiliated 15-year-old in a North Carolina classroom to the greatest player who ever lived, Michael's story proves that our biggest obstacles can become our greatest strengths when we refuse to give up. I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and let me know your city or country. If this story inspired you the way it inspired me, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that show how ordinary people overcome extraordinary challenges. And here's something important. Share this video with your friends and family. In a world that can sometimes be cruel, we need more stories that spread kindness and awareness about how we can turn our pain into purpose. Remember, someone somewhere needs to hear that they're good enough, no matter what anyone else says. Your share might reach exactly the person who needs this message today. Until next time, keep chasing your dreams and never let anyone tell you what you can't achieve.